What's up? Anthony Lee Phillips here, day 4 of the vlog. I don't really have very much to talk about today, but I thought that I would say one of my biggest influences is Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. When I was 7, my mom got me an N64 and Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and then the guidebooks for both of those. And I was not very good at video games, but what I did is I played them like a book. I learned all the lore. I went to every secret place. I went to every treasure chest and opened it up. I got as many of the powers as I could. To this day, I've never gotten a 20 heart run, because that's just not what I'm there for. I'm there for lore. I'm there to be immersed in the world. And I loved the idea of you go to the Goron village and yeah, there's a temple with an item and a monster to kill. But the reason that you have to kill the monster is because it's terrorizing the people. The reason that you go to the Shadow Temple is because there's a ghost that's terrorizing Kakariko village. And then you have to defeat the monster, and then the medallion is that's part of your quest at the end. That's a MacGuffin. But the more important thing is that you're actually trying to make the world a better place. Now, I love that. It's especially clear in Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. I can't remember the video, but there's a video on YouTube that I love, that it talks about how Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask is a Buddhist parable. It's all about cycles. It's all about Buddhism. In the end, if you collect all of the masks, then you get the Fierce Deity mask. And the Fierce Deity is actually one of 5 violent deities in the Buddhist cosmology. Very cool. And a very good essay, by the way. So check that out. Maybe I'll link it below before my nap. Yeah, I love Zelda. And that's a huge influence on NALA SAGA in a lot of ways, especially in Book 2. Because in Book 2, I took that Zelda model, and I said, yeah, I'm gonna take that. I want a piece of that. So there wasn't a temple in the Burrow Folk adventure. Excuse me. But in the next adventure, when they go down to Orlithaya, which is now called Ruinport, the place where Paco was born, there's going to be the Deep Sea Temple. And the Deep Sea Temple has a mystery attached to it because it was the temple of the Naga. And the Naga have been extinct for about 400 years, about as long as the Lich has been in power. And Nala is going to meet some of the ghosts that still, to this day, haunt that area. And it's very much like that is a cursed, war-torn area. And by going and doing a mission in the Deep Sea Temple, Nala and her friends, Nala and Paka and Rowan and Munch, the cannibalistic fairy, they're all going to go into that temple. They're going to do what they do. They're going to heal the land, or at least begin the healing of the land. They're going to be part of the healing of the land. That's another thing that I really like about Majora's Mask in particular is Link isn't actually responsible for all of it. Link goes and he gets the Goron Prince's mask. He gets the Zora Rockstar's mask. And he's merging with those characters. And that's not necessarily where I got the idea of Nala being the merging mage, being a mage who like Nala's main superpower, for those who don't know, she is the Shadow Goddess reborn. And one of the first things that I did when I was coming up with Nala, with my cosmology, was saying, what is shadow magic? Because I love shadow magic as a concept and as a visual thing, but I've never seen it done, if you know what I mean. Like I read Awaken Online, which is like the first book is you're following this necromancer. And it's a lit RPG, right? And so it's like power scaling, and he's raising the dead, he's raising an army, he's a lich, right? He's a god of rot. But the shadow stuff, it was just there for color. And it was just there it was particle effects. You know what I mean? And that's not what I wanted with my magic system. I really like Avatar: The Last Airbender too. And water bending is fundamentally different than firebending is. It's fundamentally different than metal bending. And I love that concept. And so I wanted to take a look at that and say, what is the element of shadow? Light casts a shadow, but also shadow is nighttime. When it's nighttime, everything is in shadow. What else? A shadow doesn't have matter, right? It doesn't have mass. And so when a shadow falls on something, it becomes part of that image. And I got this idea of like, oh, if you're a shadow goddess, maybe anything the shadow touches, you know, everything the light touches is your kingdom, right? Well, maybe everything the shadow touches, Nala can merge with. Right now, she's at a low level, and so she doesn't really know just how deep her power goes. She'll find it out sort of on accident through trial and error. And then she'll learn a little bit more in the Chasm Temple, where she actually finds the bones of the first shadow goddess, so to speak, the first avatar of the shadow goddess, the original, the font of this shadow magic, in the same way that Bakura has a bone dagger and a bone mask, and soon will have bone armor, that are the font of the sun god's magic, the sun demon's magic, Ung-Ra's magic, right? Those are the bones of Ung-Ra. And that's why they're so magical. That's why they can't be killed, is because the magic is so deep in there that they split the bones apart and they still live with that fire magic. Nala is going to find that in Ugru's ravine with Ugru. You know, she's going to find Ugru's bones, the bones that hold and house shadow magic in a way that can't be killed. I have this idea that what is a god? A god, by definition, is something that doesn't have to die if it doesn't want to. It has transcended death. That's a big tangent, but all this to say, I thought a lot about what the element of shadow is. I haven't read Shadow and Bone, but I love the idea that Lee Bardugo has of what if the shadow was a place? What if darkness was a place? And then trying to think about both the symbolic dimension of that, but then the literal dimension, which is maybe a good way to think about it now that I'm saying it. You know, in fantasy, we're working with a symbolic dimension as like there's an axis, right? There is an axis where the story is playing in a symbolic way. But the real masters, the thing that Name of the Wind does that few other fantasies achieve, is it also says how much of that is literalized, how much of that is literal. You know, what, like, Patrick Rothfuss studied to be a chemical engineer. And so there are a lot of things like transmuting lead into gold. You know, his big problem in that series, the problem that nobody can solve, the problem that nobody can crack, is the ever-burning lamp. Which I really love, because he said, like, what would this problem be for a chemical engineer, even if you had magic, seemingly limitless magic? Just so cool. Zelda, sort of going back to Zelda. There's going to be a lot of rambling in these vlogs. I'm really sorry. It's very, it's raw. In Zelda, you go to different regions, and those different regions have different temples with different elements, you know, different, almost like Shinto-esque deities attached to them, sometimes Shinto-esque monsters attached to them. I wanted that for my orcs. And so you go to Orlathaya, and there is a cultural problem that the gods are a part of. They either have caused or they are suffering because the people are suffering in a certain way. So when you get to Snowjaw, you know, Snowjaw politically in the world has been taken over by the Fire Tribe, by Bakura's tribe, by the Yegura. And we're going to find out about this in the next few chapters when the revived Yegura come to the Sea Torch games. But Bakura and his company have invaded this snowy, icy area, and they've made a camp in the fortress there. And that god is not happy about it. And so they might have control of it, but it's almost like that place is cursed because the god of ice, the god Ebru, who will eventually choose Paka, that god is not happy. That god, it will make them suffer until they choose to leave, which eventually they will. But when? I haven't even decided that. I think they might not leave until book 5 or 6. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, because Bakura's company is one that I'm kind of waiting until we get there to build out too much. But yeah, thought that I would just talk about one of my inspirations, and ended up talking about some temples and the shadow magic and things like that. What do you want to hear about? Do you want to hear more about the world, about the characters? Would you like to hear about writing process? I'm an outliner, all that kind of good stuff. I'll probably talk more about the story circle at some point, but do you want to know how I make maps? What do you want to know? Tell me.